Okay, welcome everyone. Today I am here with Bob Bordone, and I'm very excited because we're talking all about negotiations today. I actually had the opportunity to attend Bob's full day training, and I have to say I was engaged and amazed throughout the day. And so I wanted to help you all understand and bring Bob on to learn more about negotiation. So Bob, if people have never ever met you before, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, Kit, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm super excited to be here because I think there's a lot of connection between public speaking and negotiation. But I'll say a few words about myself too, just for context, and then we can get into that. So I have spent my entire career, more than 20 years, teaching, writing about, and researching and coaching people on issues related to negotiation and conflict resolution. My interest in that began many years ago when I was a student at Harvard Law School. I got very involved in the work of the program on negotiation at Harvard. And then ultimately was very fortunate after graduating and clerking for a judge for a year to actually teach at the law school for 21 years. I actually founded the school's negotiation and mediation clinical program, and then in 2019 went on my own to become a consultant and mediator and coach in all things related to difficult conversations, conflict resolution, and negotiation. And so that is how we ended up meeting when I was teaching an executive education course. So it's been a really fun, neat ride because I meet interesting people like you, and hopefully help people improve their capacity to influence and to persuade and to negotiate.
Wow, that's great. And so for everyone that's listening, I'm just gonna say you are all in good hands. Bob, I think a lot of people when they think of negotiation, myself included, we might be watching all these movies, FBI. Oh, negotiations are for like these FBI agents and these, like different situations. I mean, does it really apply to like work scenarios? How does it apply to work scenarios? These regular day scenarios.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Kit. And I think a common misunderstanding, right, is that people think, oh, negotiations, yeah, would happen in a hostage situation, or maybe in Congress, or at the UN, or in a labor negotiation. And those are all negotiations, right? But it absolutely applies to everyday life because the way I would define negotiation is as any communication between two or more persons with an intention to influence or to persuade. So that means for anybody who's listening here who maybe over the weekend wants to persuade their significant other that they should take a weekend trip to Cape Cod, well, you're negotiating with your spouse. Anytime you try to, get someone to do anything, it is a negotiation. Persuading your kid to go to bed on time or eat carrots is a negotiation. When you're working on a team and you're trying to make a strategic decision on how to use an advertising dollar, and you're trying to persuade others on the team that your approach is the right way, that's a negotiation. And so it's not just this kind of lofty high end thing that we might see in a movie or on the evening news, but it's really all around us.
So let's say we're in a organization team scenario. We have ideas. Other team people have ideas, and maybe we want them to accept our ideas. So you use the term persuading. What's the difference then between negotiation and persuading?
Yeah. I don't, I personally don't see a huge difference between the two, right? I define negotiation as a communication where you're trying to influence or to persuade, because that's really what negotiation is. And I think a lot of the research and tactics that come from the art of persuasion and the science of persuasion are equally applicable in the negotiation space. And of course, negotiation is more than that because it's how do you set up the table with the right set of players? How do you make sure the right issues are there before you get to the table? But some of the behavioral skills are quite similar.
Do you find that most people wait to learn negotiation until they're at a certain level or position, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think a really common mistake that people make is that they don't actually seek out any training or any professionalization of the negotiation skill, right? Their attitude often is something like, this is something you learn from experience, or you only learn by doing it. Or even worse, I hate to negotiate, so I'm just not going to do it. And what I would say is you certainly can learn from experience, and you certainly can learn by doing something. But negotiation, like almost every human activity, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's playing a musical instrument, right? You could pick up a guitar and pick some things up. You could pick up a tennis racket and kind of figure it out. But the more you know about tennis, the more intentional and self reflective you are in your practice. And the more you have a coach, just the better you're going to be. And so, negotiation, I would just say, is the kind of topic, in my view. I mean, obviously, this is what I do professionally, so I'm a little biased. But in my view, everybody should get some basic negotiation training. It's not something that you should wait until you're the chief negotiator for your union or the 2 hours before you go to the car dealer, right? But it's something that I think is incredibly useful, and it's useful for both your professional life and your personal life.
Why do you think then so many people maybe wait, or they try to or get it through experience, or maybe one day?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a number of different reasons why. I think certainly in the academic world, anything that is very applied is often seen as non serious or non academic. And so you're much more likely to learn history or chemistry because those are very academic than something that's incredibly like a life skill. I think secondarily in our society, um, somehow negotiations can get like like a dirty or negative phraseology around them, right? It's something like bargaining or it causes discomfort. And so it's not like, uh, I mean, imagine, you're thinking about a weekend date. Do you want to take a cooking class with your partner? Do you want to take a salsa class with your partner? I want to take a negotiation class with your partner, right? It's like, I'll take one or the other too. And I get that. But from a life skill return on investment, I would just say maybe you don't want that for your date, but it's definitely worth investing in. You'll just end up learning a lot.
Now I'm interested. It seems like you're very enthusiastic and have a bunch of experience with negotiation. Were you always thinking that way about the topic negotiation, or did you somehow say, "Oh yeah, maybe I need to pick this up more"?
No, I mean, I wish I somehow had some of the, what I would call foresight that I have now. But no, I mean, when I was in law school, I took a negotiation class mostly because I wasn't in general liking law school. And I thought, oh, this will help me, haggle better. This will help me bargain better. And then the entire class was an exercise in having all my assumptions questioned. So I went into it really not knowing what it was, really not knowing how much I was going to love it, and really not knowing how both incredibly applied it is, how relevant it is for daily life, but also just the level of sophistication, the interdisciplinary aspects to it that make the difference between an okay negotiator and a really great negotiator, right? And so I ended up finding it endlessly fascinating, both intellectually and tremendously rewarding professionally, getting to work with students and professionals, both in a classroom, but also just in a one-on-one setting, coaching and consulting around some, really sometimes challenging personal or professional negotiation issues.
You were mentioning, you got into it maybe thinking, "Oh, I'll haggle or bargain better."
Yeah.
So you're saying that's not what negotiation is?
That is what I'm saying. Yeah, very perceptive, Kit. That is what I'm saying. One of the misunderstandings I think is that negotiation is kind of like, some kind of zero sum haggle. You throw out a high number, I throw out a low number, and now we go back and forth and make concessions, and may the most crafty, powerful, and trickiest one of us win. And that's just a really inaccurate idea of negotiation. Because one of the things, once you start to study it and learn more about the topic, is that negotiations really offer opportunities for parties in the negotiation to do better for themselves if they can get past this initial bargaining of positions to this idea that we call understanding one's underlying interests. So, what are the deeper needs and concerns that have each of us interacting and wanting the one to do something or not do something? And once we can do that, a negotiation that might present as zero sum, maybe just about a price or just about a salary, actually becomes very multi issue. And when it's multi issue, there's lots of ways that we could structure agreements to do better for both of us than simply dividing a fixed pie.
Can we, as you're saying all of this, you're making me think of, I would love for us to maybe pick out some scenarios in real life and apply how a normal person would try to negotiate and how a skilled negotiator like yourself would come in with a different mindset of how to do it.
Yeah.
How does that sound? We think of some kind of situation and say, this is how it's normally done, and this is how a skilled negotiator like yourself, here's how they would think about it differently.
Sure. Yeah. Um, want me to give you? You want me to give you one that some years ago I had to work through? Yeah. So this is a mediation I did some years ago involving uh, like a long story shorter. It was a family who their parents had passed away. They were, and these two siblings are dividing up various assets in the family. One of the assets was an extremely uh, nice, costly beach house. And both siblings actually did want to sell it and divide the proceeds. So that was not the issue. The issue was the timing, right? One sibling wanted to hold on to the property for 5 years. The other wanted just one more summer in it and then wanted to sell it. And this was a very sticky point of conflict. Um, I think the way that many people might handle this might be to just haggle it out and say, why don't we say after 2.5 years or 3 years, right? Split the difference. Uh, Another way people might do it is if, for example, one of the siblings was more desperate for the money, they might say something like, well, if you cave to me, I'll let you get more than half or something like that, right? Because they need the money, right? But the way I would say a more sophisticated negotiator, and this is just a simple example, but it's, I think, a not uncommon one, right, might say is, well, what is it for each of these siblings about 1 year and 5 years? Like, why are they stuck on that? In other words, in the language of negotiation, what are their interests? And in this case, one of the things that we learned was that the sibling that wanted to sell was really just looking at the effects of climate change, and a sense that where this property was, there was increasing beach erosion, and a sense just that property values were declining, and would be declining somewhat precipitously, and they were quite risk averse, and they felt like holding for 5 years is just like flushing money down the toilet. The sibling that wanted to hold the property just had taken the loss of the parents much harder and felt like they just needed more time to. I mean, this is a place where they had spent all of their summers for their entire life and wanted some more time to just adjust. Um, and once you get at those interests, there are all sorts of possible outcomes that could work that don't involve splitting the difference, that could actually meet both siblings' interests. So, specifically in this case, what they agreed to do was that they'd keep the property for 5 years. At the end of the first year, they would bring in three real estate agents who would assess the value of the property. They would take the average of that. When the property was sold in year five, if the property value had in some way gone down, the sibling that wanted to hold the property would still pay the 50% of the valuation in year one. And if the property value had gone up, then they would just split the proceeds 50-50. Um, and this was a way where nobody had to make a compromise. The one that was risk averse, their risk was covered, right? The one who wanted to have that property for 5 years didn't have to prematurely say goodbye. So that's just a very simple example, but I think to me it highlights the difference between an attitude of the way we negotiate is we haggle and split the difference, and the way we negotiate is we understand what's underlying our concerns and try to create value. And you could, I mean, that's a real life example, but there's all sorts of real life examples, right? I mean, literally, where are we going to have dinner on Friday night? Someone says I want Chinese, someone says I want Italian. Uh, well, maybe that's just it, but maybe it's um, you know, there's something about the Italian restaurant that makes me feel at home. Or maybe it's actually, I know that my friends are going to be in the Chinese restaurant and I really want to hang out with them. Um, okay, well, gosh, maybe we could find a way to hang out with your friends and have something that feels homey. So I don't know if that's helpful, Kit, but
Yeah,
those are.
so it seems like, well, what about if we don't have all the time in the world? It seems like now we have to go back and forth a lot. Listen to them, listen to us. What if they're not open minded? What if we have all the time in the world and we have to make faster decisions?
Yeah.
What do we do in those cases?
Yeah. I mean, I think a few thoughts I have on that, right? So, you always have to make an assessment of how you're going to approach a negotiation based on your full set of interests, right? But if, for example, one of the interests is time, I think there are ways that you can create some additional value at almost no additional time. I mean, the way you get someone moving from positions to interests is if they say 400,000, you say 200,000, now you have to haggle. They say 400,000 and you say, help me understand how you ride to 400,000. I'm not sure that's actually more inefficient. Now, it is true that sometimes, right, time is an issue, and then you have to make a decision. Hey, like I'm haggling in a market on vacation somewhere. I'm not sure I need to pull out my state of the art negotiation skills, right? Maybe I just haggle. I mean, on your second question, right, which is a really great one, which is, how do I deal with hard bargainers or people who use different negotiation or hard negotiation tactics? That requires a long answer to that. And also to say that there are a set of behavioral moves that often can blunt that kind of behavior without escalating the negotiation. But I think for that one, we probably need some more time, right? When I teach a 2 day workshop, we just barely start to touch on that on day two, and but it isn't the case that I can like only do this approach with people who want to do it with me. I could also do this approach with people who are resistant.
Nice. Well, as I was speaking, I'm smiling because I was thinking, if you have two skilled negotiators against each other, is one person thinking, oh, I wonder what techniques or tactics or strategies they're using. Oh, they just did that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you have two truly skilled negotiators who really understand how to drive the maximum value in a negotiation, that's the dream. Because the best way to create value in a negotiation is working with somebody who gets it and understands how to do that and wants to do that with you. Um, that's different from two crafty negotiators who somehow think that the way to negotiate is to trick you or otherwise give the impression that they would or wouldn't do certain things. And now you're in a game of brinksmanship. And unfortunately, and this is makes me sad as somebody who teaches this and studies and writes about this, many of us think negotiation is about brinksmanship. And that story gets reinforced through daily media, right? Through the way we watch movies. Um, um, Americans are not known for loving nuance, right? We like yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad, winners, losers. But the nature of negotiation isn't really like that. And so, kind of my life's mission is to kind of as many people as possible, to understand this approach to negotiation, not for any other reason, but that they will do better for themselves.
What was that term that you used earlier? Brainmanship?
Brinksmanship. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I'm not enunciating well. Brinksmanship. Yeah,
Um, this has popped into my mind. I love everything you're talking about, but for someone, let's say we don't know too much about negotiation, would you be able to give us a framework that we can quickly apply, and then we can apply it to a situation and see it live? So here's the situation that I'm thinking about, and then you can maybe see how we can finagle this. So let's say, and you can change the situation. I'm just thinking about this. Let's say me and you, Bob, we're stuck together at the same house, and we want to go to downtown. But we both disagree with the way we go to downtown. You want to walk, I want to take the T.
yeah, yeah. So the biggest framework, right, or way of thinking about this is, um, we each have something we call a position. I want to walk, you want to take the T. Then the next question I would ask is, well, why do you want to walk? And what I'm doing there is asking, trying to understand what is your interest behind the position of walking. So if I were to ask you that, Kit, like, why do you want to walk?
Oh, it's more enjoyable. We don't the T. We're just sitting there. It's more enjoyable. We get to see the scenes.
I see. So it's about enjoyment and also getting to see the scenes when you're in the T or underground. Okay. And what do you enjoy about the walking?
What I enjoy about the walking is we can also exercise. We're moving our bodies.
Exercise.
Yes.
Great. So that's also an important piece as well. What else?
I get to spend time with you walking.
And time with me. We get additional time together.
Yeah,
Great.
that's about it.
Great. So it sounds like the upsides of walking are, one, we get the view, which we wouldn't get in the T. Two, we get some exercise, and three, we get some additional time with each other.
Yes, yes. Well, I want to pause there. I want to ask what you're doing. So
Yeah.
you're understanding our position,
Yeah.
and now you're asking questions. Tell us more
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
And when I'm asking you the questions, right, what I'm doing is trying to understand what is what we say the interest, the underlying reason that's driving the position of walking.
And what is your position?
And why am I doing that?
What do you mean by position?
Position is what someone says they want in a negotiation. What you say you want is I want to walk. That's what you want. The interest is what is the reason for that position or reasons, right? And the reasons that I heard in this, made up conversation are view, time with me, and exercise. So this idea in negotiation of moving from positions to interests. The reason why we want to do that is as soon as we hear that, I could think of all sorts of ways to have nice scenery, more time with you, and exercise that aren't about walking. I could say, hey, forget the T where I know we're underground. Let's take an Uber. Let's take an Uber. But you know what? When we get there, before we have our dinner, why don't we take a walk through downtown? Because we'll have a little extra time with each other. And hey, bonus kit, we'll get to see more things that we would have done if we would have just walked. Because we'll get to see everything we would have seen if we walked there, plus all the walking we'll do around there. Um, and presumably in the same thing, right? You would have to understand what are my interests about, not going not going on the not walking,
Okay.
basically.
So what if it's, let's say, again, your position is, again, yours is the T, and let's say I want to walk, but let's say you don't want to walk at all, and most people are like, I want you to adopt the T. Yeah, it must be that way, or everything loses.
Yeah, I would say, why is that? Help me understand what that's about. What's better about it?
No, I'm saying you think the T is so much better. So what I'm saying is people that could be in your position, your.
Oh, you mean if I'm saying, right? I mean, I think I would continually try to understand what is it for this person that is better about the tea, right? Now, at the end of the day, there's going to be like, I'm not telling you it's the tea, my way or the highway. I mean, at that point, I think most people aren't like that, but at that point, I think I make a decision. Is it worth my bother to accede to their request here, given what I might do without them, right? I've done the best I could, and I might just say, you know what? Yeah, maybe we just shouldn't hang out, right? Or, fine, I'll do this, but I'm going to make sure next Friday night I have better friends to hang out with, you know?
Okay.
So,
Uh,
so in other words, you're always trying to make an assessment of whether you should agree. Ultimately, is always based on, is agreeing better than what I would do without the agreement?
got it. So I think I cut you off earlier. So let's say you know my position. You're asking for my interest, and you were asking these questions, right? And I'm telling you all the reasons why I want to walk. What happens next?
So then the move, right, is to take those reasons and say, are there ways we can meet your interests that might be different from walking? We could brainstorm what they are,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, I just gave you an example a few minutes ago of something that would do that, right? That would, and presumably would have to meet whatever my interests are for not, for taking whatever my argument of taking the tea. With me, we don't know what is my reason for taking the tea. We don't really know yet because we haven't done that.
Yeah.
But the idea is once we get at the party's interest, chances are we could come up with other ways of achieving both parties' interests than just getting deadlocked.
Hmm. Hmm. So this is good. I don't want to segue us off because I was thinking of another situation, like a work situation, which is kind of like this, but let's walk into the tea. But what about, okay? So let's say we are in a work scenario. We all just want to make more money. Okay, you believe we have to do it this way. Let's say do it this way is we have to do this experiment. Okay, and my way is we should not do this experiment. And we have a 1 hour meeting, a 30-minute meeting. You say again. So my question back is, within this 30-minute meeting, how can you have all the time to ask me all the questions and for me to ask you all the questions, and then we don't make any decisions at the end of the day?
We might not be able to. Right? I mean, part of being a good negotiator is being able to say, in order to make the right decision here, Kit, we need enough time I need enough time to understand why you think we should do this experiment. And you need to, I don't know, enough time to understand why I think we should do whatever it is I think we should do. And I know it'd be nice to drive a decision in 30 minutes, but that would not be a wise decision. And from a negotiation perspective, I want to set up a process that drives a good decision. I mean, I'm not saying we need to spend the next 3 years figuring out which experiment we're going to do. But if you're going to spend a lot of time doing an experiment, or I'm going to spend a lot of time doing whatever it is I think we should do, and we think that's an investment of our wisdom, time, energy, and resources in this organization, then the notion that we can't spend more than 30 minutes thinking that through and we see things differently doesn't sound super wise to me. So I would slow it down. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this approach to negotiation is all about not losing anything. That's the whole idea. When we move from positions to interests, we're not trying to only partially meet our interests, we're trying to fully meet our interests. I mean, if you're telling me I'm working with somebody who is just going to say, whatever, I only want macaroni and cheese, and that's the only thing I'll have. Period. End of story. Well, that's really not a negotiation. There's not much you could do with that person. If you keep on saying to them, why, help me understand, and they're just like, that's what I want, I don't care. Like, there's not much you can do with them, I think, except to say, is giving them what they want better for me than walking away?
And this is great. So, I'm thinking of people in organizations. Let's say this is their boss, right? The boss says this way or the highway. And it's like, okay, that's my, like, I'm trying to negotiate with the boss, but if the boss doesn't listen to me, I just have to do it that way. Doesn't it suck?
But yeah, and it does. And lots of times bosses do say something like that. But you know what? A lot of people don't do in response. Say to their boss, I'd really like to understand, what is it about this way that works for you? Or like, help me understand why is that your preferred way? Because I want to make sure I please you. But what I don't understand is why you're thinking about it this way. Those are the kinds of questions people don't ask. And when those questions are asked at the right time and in a genuinely curious way, not every single boss responds, of course not. I mean, there are dictators in the world, but most people are like, oh, let me tell you why. Blah, 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 blah. And when they're telling you why is when you learn what really matters to them. And whenever you understand what really matters to somebody, that opens up space for a conversation. And I just think people are not good at that because what they say is, oh, my boss is impossible, or she's just a dictator, or he just, is a single track mind. And again, I don't want your listeners to think I'm naive and think that everybody is pliable, but I know for sure that most of the time that behavior is not because the person is completely inflexible. It's because they're using something that has worked very successfully. Because most people just say, okay. And if you fight back, of course, that's going to get you in trouble. But if you find a good and generous way to enlist the thinking of the person giving you the order or the command, to understand what's driving that, you often find that there are ways that you can actually work with that person and maybe serve them better in the long run.
So I'm getting a sense from you. It's really understanding, right? Really understanding the person, asking them basically why they like the way or the position or interest. So let's say you understand about all of that from the other person. You understand the position, you understand all the interests, all the reasons. Now, how do you kind of like if we have a different way, how do we kind of like open up their mind so they can listen?
Yeah, I mean, so I think you have to demonstrate, first of all, that you do understand everything that's important to them because they need to know that you know that. And then I think you invite them to say, how can we think about what are some of the ways we could achieve all the things you're asking for that might be different than the single way we currently have on the table? Um, and that's where you're trying to engage them in a brainstorming, a collaborative process.
Got it. Bob, we're talking a lot about, and we're getting to the nitty gritties. If people are loving everything that you're saying and they want to learn more about you, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I have a YouTube channel, which is literally called Bob Bordone. So I'd love for you to go over there. There are more than 500 videos, some of which spend a lot more time answering some of the questions that you have very nicely asked me, Kit. They also go to my webpage, bobbordone.com. And I'm also writing a brand new book that is really addressing issues of polarization in our society, both at the political level, but also at the family level, the organizational level. It's called Conflict Resilience, Negotiating Disagreement Without Giving Up or Giving In. So I'd love folks to check that out on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you buy your books. Uh,
More questions, Bob. Do you have any pet peeves when it comes to negotiation or what people do? If if you have any.
I mean, there's all sorts of things that I think, yes. I think, we've been talking about one of them here, which is just the way in which many people misunderstand what negotiation is. So I won't repeat that. Um, I think the other pet peeve that I have is when people choose not to negotiate. So what I would describe as avoidant behavior. Um, many, many more things are negotiable than you might think. And if you do it in a skillful way, it can be fun. You can actually get more, and I would say make other people on the other side happier. So I just think this is an activity that more of us should think about doing instead of letting it slide. And that's one of the, I think, themes of the work that I've been doing. I think more recently is helping people be more confident and assertive, which is really different from aggressive or confrontational.
That's great. Well, are there any other questions that you think I should ask but did not ask? Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's a million great questions on things in negotiation. I mean, my hope is that some of people on your channel here find this topic to be more interesting and valuable, and so I hope that our conversation has inspired questions for all of you who are watching. Kit, thank you for having me. Yeah, bobbordone.com or my YouTube channel, which is just called Bob Bordone. And yeah, think about a pre-order of my book. I think it's going to be really fun and very readable. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. And for everyone that's listening, if you have not worked in your negotiation, or maybe you have, or maybe you dibbled and dabbled, like you can see, like this is a life skill that you should definitely have to become a better leader, parent, friend. I highly am aiming to learn more about this skill myself as well. So, Bob, thank you so much for your insights today.